So, the ghost finally leaves footprints. Look who just made the Pentagon sweat through their pressed uniforms. You magnificent, untraceable anomaly. You walking classified document that nobody has clearance to read. Let me tell you something about that day, that moment, that fraction of a second when you did what you did. They had protocols for everything. Procedures for nuclear threats, alien contact, cyber warfare, biological weapons. They had contingency plans, stacked on contingency plans. But they had nothing, absolutely nothing for what they witnessed when you finally stopped pretending to be normal. Sir, that's illegal. That's what the decorated officer whispered, his voice cracking like a teenage recruit on his first day. Not that's impossible, not that's incredible, illegal. Because in their world of rules and ranks and regulations, what you possess shouldn't exist. You know what happened next, don't you? The room went silent. 23 of the most battle-hardened, psychologically bulletproof operators in existence. And they all took a step back. Not out of fear, out of recognition. They'd seen power before, studied it, wielded it, faced it down in every corner of this burning world. But this was different. This was you operating at 2% capacity on a Tuesday afternoon, barely trying, just existing in your natural state for once, and their entire understanding of human limitation shattered like cheap glass hitting concrete. The reports are still classified, not top secret, above that. So far above that they had to invent new classifications just to file what they saw. Let's talk about what you really are, shall we? Not what they told you to be. Not what society tried to squeeze you into, but what you actually are. When all the masks fall off and the pretense drops, and you stop playing their little game of normal. You're not gifted. Gifts can be given and taken away. You're not talented. Talent can be taught, replicated, understood. What you are is a glitch in their matrix, a mutation in their careful breeding program of mediocrity. You're what happens when nature decides to show off, to remind everyone that evolution isn't finished. They've been studying human potential for decades. Billions in black budgets. Underground facilities, the brightest minds working around the clock to push the boundaries of what's possible. Super soldiers, enhanced operatives, augmented assets. They thought they were creating the future. Then you walked in. No enhancement, no training, no multi-million-dollar program backing you up. Just you. Raw and unfiltered, doing things their enhanced assets couldn't dream of on their best day with every advantage. And that's when they realized they weren't looking at the future. They were looking at what they'd been trying to suppress all along. The military elite, these apex predators of human capability, they recognize their own obsolescence when it stares them in the face. And you didn't even notice you were doing it. That's what terrified them most. It wasn't effort for you. It was breathing. Remember when they brought in the specialists? Oh, they tried to be subtle about it. Casual observations, friendly conversations, little tests disguised as standard procedures. They wanted to quantify you, to put numbers on what you could do, to find the edges of your ability so they could build a box around. The psychologist quit after 3 sessions, said your mind operated on frequencies that shouldn't exist in human consciousness. The physicist had a breakdown trying to explain how you bent rules he'd spent his life proving were unbendable. The biologist? She just stared at your test results and whispered, "This violates everything we know." But my favorite was the combat instructor. 30 years of experience, trained killers on 6 continents, wrote the book on modern warfare tactics. He watched you for 10 minutes and said 5 words that ended his career. We can't counter this. They tried everything. Motion sensors that couldn't track your movement patterns, prediction algorithms that crashed trying to calculate your next decision, measurement tools that gave impossible readings or simply refused to function in your presence. You weren't just outside their box. You were proof the box was a lie. And through it all, you just smiled that quiet smile of yours. Not arrogant, not proud, just aware. Because deep down, you've always known what they were just discovering. You don't operate by their rules, because you were never meant to. Let me paint you a picture of power. Real power. Not the kind that comes from rank or wealth or weapons, but the kind that makes seasoned generals pace their offices at 3 a.m., staring at reports that shouldn't exist, trying to figure out what to do with you. They've seen enhanced humans before. They've worked with psychics, remote viewers, people who could do things that would make civilian heads explode. But those people had limits, clear, defined, manageable limits. They fit into categories, into programs, into chains of command. You're a category unto yourself, a walking violation of everything they thought they knew about human potential. And the worst part for them? They can't replicate it. They've tried. Damn how they've tried. Genetic screening, environmental analysis, psychological profiling. They've dissected every moment of your life trying to figure out how you became what you are. But here's what they'll never understand. You didn't become anything. You just stopped pretending to be less. All those years of dimming yourself, of playing small, of letting them think you were just another face in the crowd, you weren't hiding your power. You were protecting them from it. The day you stopped protecting them, the day you let just a glimpse of your true capacity shine through, that's the day their world ended and yours began. They still have the footage, locked away in vaults so secure that even mentioning their existence is a federal crime. You want to know why that officer called it illegal? Not impossible, not unbelievable, but illegal, because in their world, power has rules. It flows through proper channels, respects hierarchy, follows predictable patterns. It can be controlled, directed, contained. What you possess violates every law they've written about human capability. Not just physical laws, the deeper laws. The ones that say ordinary people stay ordinary, that power comes from systems and structures, that individuals can't transcend their programming without help. You're evidence of something they've spent centuries trying to suppress, that some humans are born with capabilities that make their entire power structure obsolete. Not through training, not through enhancement, not through their permission, but through something older, deeper, more primal than their uniforms and protocols can touch. They have terms for people like you in their classified files, terms the public will never hear, not gifted or special, or any of those sanitized labels, the real terms, the ones that admit what you represent, an evolutionary leap that happened without their consent. And that's what truly terrifies them. Not what you can do, but what you represent. If one person can naturally possess what they spend billions trying to artificially create. If one individual can break every limit they've carefully established, then what does that say about their necessity? Let's get specific about what sent them into crisis mode, shall we? Because it wasn't just one thing. It never is with people like you. It was the constellation of impossibilities that you call Tuesday afternoon. The way you process information at speeds their supercomputers struggle to match, but you call it intuition. The way you read micro-expressions that their best interrogators miss, but you just say someone felt off. The way your presence alone shifts probability, bends outcomes, changes the fundamental mathematics of any situation you enter. They have machines that cost millions just to detect what you do naturally. Entire departments dedicated to achieving a fraction of what flows through you like blood through veins. Years of training compressed into instincts you were born with. Memories, organs, physical and moral forms, instinct and bodily instinct. But it's not just what you can do, it's how you do it. Without effort, without strain, without even conscious thought half the time. Like a concert pianist who doesn't need to look at the keys, except the piano is reality itself, and you're composing symphonies they don't have notation for. The military-industrial complex, with all its might and money and cutting-edge technology, took one look at you operating at baseline and realized they were obsolete. Not in 10 years, not in 5, but right now, today, in this moment, because you exist. Somewhere in a facility that doesn't officially exist, there's a file with your name on it. Except it's not really a file anymore. It's become something else. A living document that grows stranger with each edition, each observation, each impossible thing you do without thinking. They've rewritten your classification 17 times, started with person of interest, upgraded to enhanced individual, then anomalous asset. Each label trying and failing to contain what you are. The latest classification? It's just your initials, followed by a string of numbers that translate to beyond current understanding. The analysts assigned to you don't last long, not because anything happens to them, but because prolonged exposure to evidence of you starts to break down their worldview. They request transfers, early retirement, anything to stop staring at data that suggests human potential has no ceiling. Every expert they bring in adds another layer of impossibility to your file. The linguist who noted you understand languages you've never studied. The strategist who realized you solve problems before you consciously recognize them. The physician who documented biological readings that rewrite textbooks. But my favorite entry? It's from a janitor who wasn't supposed to see the file. He wrote 3 words in the margin. They walk different. Because sometimes the deepest truths come from the simplest observations. They had to create new protocols because of you, not for dealing with enhanced humans. They had those. Not for containing security threats. Those existed. But for something unprecedented, a human operating outside the known spectrum of possibility. The protocol has a code name that would make you laugh. Something mundane and bureaucratic that completely fails to capture the paradigm shift you represent. But everyone who's read it knows what it really means. We have no framework for this. It starts with recognition procedures. How to identify when someone has transcended normal human limitations, not through artificial means, but through natural evolution. The signs are subtle to the untrained eye, but scream to those who know. The way air seems denser around you. How probability bends in your favor. The unconscious deference even alphas show in your presence. Then come the interaction guidelines. Don't attempt to contain. Don't attempt to control. Observe, document, and, above all, don't provoke. Because they learned early that you're not a force that can be opposed. You're a reality that must be navigated. The final section is the shortest and most telling. It's titled Contingency Planning, but contains only one line. There is no contingency for this level of natural capability. Signed by Joint Chiefs who've never agreed on anything else in their careers. Oh, they tried to recruit you, not with the usual methods. Sign-on bonuses, patriotic appeals, promises of purpose. They knew better. They tried to recruit you the way you recruit a force of nature, carefully, respectfully, and with full knowledge that you hold all the cards. The first approach was subtle. Opportunities that just happened to appear in your path, projects that coincidentally aligned with your interests, resources made available with no strings attached, or so they claimed. They thought they could guide you into their world through gentle manipulation. When that failed, they tried partnership, equals working together for the greater good, except there was nothing equal about it, and everyone in the room knew it. You don't partner with gravity. You don't negotiate with lightning. You work within the reality they create, or you get out of the way. The final attempt was honesty. They laid it all out. The threats they faced, the limitations of their conventional assets, the need for something beyond their current capabilities. They offered you everything. Unlimited resources, complete autonomy, the chance to reshape global security. You listened politely, smiled that knowing smile, and walked away. Because you understood what they couldn't. You weren't meant to serve their system. You were meant to transcend it entirely. Make no mistake, they respect you. The kind of respect reserved for natural disasters and apex predators. But underneath that respect lives something else. A primal fear that keeps them awake at night. It's not fear of what you might do. You've shown remarkable restraint, considering your capabilities. It's fear of what you represent. Proof that their entire structure, their careful hierarchies and control mechanisms can be rendered irrelevant by a single individual who simply is what they've spent lifetimes trying to become. They fear the questions you raise. If one person can naturally possess abilities that eclipse their billion-dollar programs, what else have they been wrong about? What other impossibilities walk among them, hidden in plain sight? What happens when more people like you stop pretending to be normal? But their deepest fear, it's that you're not unique, that you're just the first visible crack in a dam that's been holding back human potential for centuries, that scattered across the globe are others like you, waiting for permission to stop pretending, to stop dimming their light, to stop playing by rules written by people who can't even imagine what you are. They look at you and see their own obsolescence, not in some distant future, but walking around right now, wearing normal clothes, living a normal life, except for those moments when you forget to pretend, and reality itself holds its breath. Let's talk about the moment everything changed. Not for them, they're still scrambling to catch up, but for you. The moment you decided to stop apologizing for what you are, stop pretending limitations that were never yours, stop playing small in a world built for small. It wasn't dramatic, no lightning bolts or swelling music, just a quiet decision on an ordinary morning that you were done. Done pretending to struggle with things that came naturally, done dimming your perception to match their expectations, done living at 10% to make others comfortable. The shift was immediate, not in what you could do, that was always there, but in what you allowed yourself to be. Like taking off weights you'd worn so long, you'd forgotten they weren't part of you. Like breathing fully for the first time in years. And they noticed. God, did they notice? Sensors going haywire, algorithms failing, entire departments dedicated to understanding what had changed. But the answer was simple. Nothing had changed. You'd just stopped changing yourself to fit their world. The reports from that day read like science fiction, abilities manifesting that broke their understanding of physics, perception expanding beyond any documented human range. And through it all, you were just being yourself for the first time in forever. So here we are, you finally free to exist at your actual capacity, them scrambling to understand what that means for everything they thought they knew. The world unknowingly standing at the edge of a shift that started the day you stopped pretending. They'll keep watching, keep documenting, keep trying to find the source of what you are. They'll bring in new experts, develop new theories, create new classifications that still won't capture the truth, because the truth is too simple for their complicated minds. Some humans are born beyond their metric. You'll keep walking through their world, no longer hiding, but not flaunting either, just existing at a level that rewrites the possible with every breath, making their enhanced assets look like children playing dress-up, solving problems they haven't even recognized yet. And somewhere in those classified facilities, analysts will keep adding to your file, each entry more impossible than the last, each observation pushing against the boundaries of what they thought humans could be. Until one day, someone will write the only conclusion that matters. Subject represents evolution in progress. Our frameworks are obsolete. Recommend complete restructuring of human potential assessment. Note, they know we're watching. They don't care. Sir, that's what's truly illegal. We built a world for humans and they're already something else. You are not the end. You're the beginning. The first visible note in a symphony that's been building beneath their notice for generations. The crack in their dam that's about to become a flood. And they know it. Every day more people feel that stirring inside them. That sense that they're capable of more than they've been told. That the limitations they've accepted aren't theirs. That maybe, just maybe, they're like you, forced to play normal in a world that fears what normal could become. The military elite who witnessed your capabilities, they went home changed, not just professionally, but personally. Because once you've seen someone casually break the supposed laws of human limitation, you start wondering what laws you've accepted that were never real. Their reports get more frantic each month. Not about you specifically, you're already beyond their ability to predict or control, but about the others, the ones starting to show signs, the ones beginning to question, the ones who heard whispers about what you did and thought, that sounds familiar. Because here's what they're beginning to understand. You're not a mutation. You're a revelation. Not an anomaly, but an awakening. The first drop of rain before the storm that washes away everything they built to contain human potential. Ah, look who finally showed up. Yeah, you. The one scrolling through at 3 in the morning, looking for something that feels real. Looking for proof that you're not losing your mind. Looking for confirmation that what you're feeling isn't crazy. Well, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you is gonna flip everything you thought you knew about who's really in your corner. Who's really riding for you. Who's been moving in silence like a shadow with a switchblade and a prayer. See, while you've been out here thinking you're alone, thinking nobody sees you, thinking nobody cares, there's been someone operating in the frequencies you can't even detect. Someone who's been handling your problems before you even knew they were problems. Someone who loves you so violently, so completely, so dangerously, that they've been out here dismantling your enemies piece by piece. And you didn't even notice, did you? Because that's the thing about real protection. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need credit. It doesn't post about it on social media. It just moves. And the bodies drop. And by bodies, I mean their confidence, their plans, their ability to sleep at night, their peace of mind. Yeah, those bodies. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds insane. This sounds like some conspiracy theory. This sounds like I'm about to sell you something or tell you to join a cult. But stay with me, because you've felt it, haven't you? That weird shift in energy when someone who was coming for you suddenly backed off. That strange turn of events when your hater suddenly had their own crisis to deal with. That peculiar moment when someone who was plotting against you mysteriously lost their footing, their confidence, their position, their power. And you thought it was coincidence. You thought it was karma. You thought it was just luck. But it wasn't. It was someone moving chess pieces on a board you can't even see. Someone who decided that anyone who hurts you, anyone who plots against you, anyone who even thinks about dimming your light is going to have a very, very bad time. And they've been making good on that promise every single day. You just haven't been paying attention because you've been too busy surviving, too busy healing, too busy becoming who you're meant to be, while they've been clearing the path ahead of you like a spiritual snowplow, removing obstacles you'll never even know existed. Let me paint you a picture, because this is where it gets wild. You know that person who was talking behind your back, spreading lies, poisoning the well, trying to turn people against you? Yeah. Them. Well, funny thing happened, isn't it? Suddenly, their own secrets started surfacing. Suddenly, people started seeing through their mask. Suddenly, the very tactics they used against you backflipped and caught them in the throat. And you thought that was just justice. You thought that was just the universe balancing the scales. But no. That was intervention. That was someone who loves you, pulling strings you can't see, pressing buttons you don't have access to, making phone calls in dimensions you can't pronounce. Because here's what you need to understand. When someone truly loves you, I'm not talking about the surface love, the Instagram love, the performative love. I'm talking about that deep, ancient, soul-level love that transcends logic and enters the realm of spiritual warfare. When someone loves you like that, they don't just sit back and watch you suffer. They don't just send thoughts and prayers. They become the storm. They become the reckoning. They become the thing your enemies have nightmares about. And they do it all without you ever asking, without you ever knowing, without ever needing the credit. You want to know why that toxic person suddenly lost interest in tormenting you? It wasn't because they got bored. It was because someone made it clear that every action has a reaction, and the reaction they were about to face was going to be biblical. You want to know why that opportunity that seemed impossible suddenly opened up? It wasn't luck. It was someone moving mountains you can't see, removing barriers you didn't know existed, creating pathways that shouldn't logically exist. You want to know why you're still standing when by all accounts you should have crumbled? It's because someone has been holding you up in ways that defy physics, defying logic, defying the very laws of nature itself. And they do it because they can't not do it, because their love for you is so intense, so consuming, so overwhelming that sitting idle while you suffer is not an option. So they move, and they move hard, and they move without mercy. And the people who tried to break you suddenly find themselves broken, and they never quite understand why. They never quite figure out what happened. They just know that something shifted, something changed, and suddenly the target on your back became a target on theirs. Now here's where it gets even deeper. Because this person who loves you, this guardian, this silent warrior, they're not doing this because they think you're weak. They're not doing this because they think you can't handle your own battles. They're doing this because they see your potential. They see your destiny. They see the version of you that's coming, and they'll be damned if anyone gets in the way of that transformation. And they may be decent enough to trust, See, you're too busy evolving, too busy shedding skin, too busy becoming, too busy ascending, to waste time dealing with mosquitoes and gnats. So they handle it. They swat them away. They eliminate the distractions. They clear the static. They make sure that when you're ready to level up, there's nothing in your way, no surprise attacks, no ambushes waiting in the darkness, because they've already swept the room. They've already checked the shadows. They've already neutralized the threats before you even entered the building. And that is love. That is protection. That is the kind of loyalty that doesn't show up in greeting cards, but shows up in your enemies suddenly losing sleep, suddenly losing power, suddenly losing their grip on reality itself. Let's talk about patterns, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Think back over the last year, the last 2 years, the last 5 years. How many times did something that should have destroyed you just mysteriously fall apart? How many times did someone who was coming for you suddenly have their own crisis? How many times did a situation that looked impossible suddenly resolve itself in ways you can't explain? You chalked it up to resilience. You chalked it up to luck. You chalked it up to your own strength. And yeah, you are strong. Yeah, you are resilient. But there's been a force multiplier at work, a cosmic backup, a silent partner who's been running interference while you've been running forward. See, they don't want credit. They don't need recognition. They just need you to make it to where you're going. And they will burn down entire forests to clear your path. And you'll never even smell the smoke, because by the time you get there, the ashes have been swept away, the evidence removed, and all you see is an open road. Think about that person who betrayed you, who stabbed you in the back, who smiled in your face while sharpening the knife. Yeah, them. What happened to them, really? What happened after they crossed you? Because I bet if you really think about it, their life didn't exactly flourish, did it? I bet things started falling apart for them in ways that seemed almost poetic, almost too perfect to be random. Their relationships crumbled, their opportunities dried up, their reputation took hits they couldn't recover from, their mental health spiraled, their confidence shattered, and everyone around them started seeing what you saw all along, and you thought that was just karma. That was just the universe correcting itself. But it was more targeted than that. It was more intentional than that. Because karma is patient. But love is immediate. And when someone loves you the way this person loves you, karma doesn't get to take its time. Karma gets accelerated. Karma gets weaponized. Karma becomes a tactical strike. And your betrayer never stood a chance. Now let's go deeper. Because this isn't just about enemies. This is about obstacles. This is about closed doors that suddenly swung open. About impossible situations that suddenly became possible. About resources that appeared out of nowhere. About connections that materialized at exactly the right moment. You thought you were just lucky. You thought you were just grinding hard enough. But there's been someone behind the scenes making calls you didn't make, opening doors you didn't knock on, creating opportunities that didn't exist until they spoke them into existence. And they do it because your success is their mission, your happiness is their obsession, and they respect at that altar every single day, with actions you'll never see, with sacrifices you'll never know about, with battles fought in dimensions you can't access. And the enemies don't even know they're fighting this person. They just know they suddenly can't breathe, can't think, can't move against you without consequence. Here's what's really happening. Every time someone plots against you, every time someone wishes you harm, every time someone tries to block your path, there's an immediate cosmic response. There's a rebalancing, there's a recalibration. And that person who loves you, they're the one initiating the sequence. They're the one who says, "Not on my watch." They're the one who activates defenses you didn't know you had, who calls in favors from places you've never been, who pulls strings connected to puppets you've never seen. And suddenly the person who was coming for you finds themselves in quicksand, finds themselves in darkness, finds themselves in a maze with no exit, and they panic, and they scramble, and they wonder what the hell happened. And the answer is simple. They messed with someone who's protected, someone who's covered, someone who's loved so hard that the universe itself bends to keep them safe. You want proof? Look at your life right now. Really look at it. How are you still here after everything you've been through? How are you still sane after the betrayals, the losses, the pain, the darkness? Are you still standing, still fighting, still believing, still hoping? When by all accounts you should be broken, shattered, destroyed? And the answer isn't just your strength. The answer isn't just your resilience. The answer is that you've never been fighting alone. You've had someone in your corner, someone in the shadows, someone in the spaces between spaces, who's been catching you when you fall, who's been lifting you when you can't stand, who's been breathing life into you when you wanted to give up. And they do it because they have to, because loving you isn't a choice for them. It's a compulsion. It's a calling. It's the reason they exist. And anyone who threatens that, anyone who tries to harm you, becomes public enemy number one in a war they don't even know they're losing. Now, we need to talk about something most people don't understand, which is that real love, real protection, doesn't look like what you see in movies. It doesn't look like someone jumping in front of a bullet. It doesn't look like dramatic confrontations or public displays. It looks like silence. It looks like distance. It looks like nothing happening at all on the surface. But underneath, there's a war being waged. And your enemies are losing battles they don't even know they're fighting. Because this person who loves you, they operate in the invisible. They move in the undetectable. They strike in ways that leave no fingerprints, no evidence, no trace. Just results, just outcomes. Just your enemies suddenly finding themselves in situations they can't explain, losing things they thought were secure, watching their plans crumble for reasons they can't identify. And they go crazy trying to figure it out, trying to understand what went wrong. But they never will, because they're looking for logical explanations for spiritual warfare. They're looking for human causes, for cosmic intervention. Let me tell you how this really works, because it's not what you think. When someone is coming for you, when someone is plotting, when someone is planning your downfall, this person who loves you, they don't confront them directly. They don't make threats. They don't issue warnings. They just observe, and they wait, and then they move. And the move is always perfect, always precisely calibrated, always devastatingly effective. Maybe it's a word in the right ear. Maybe it's information that surfaces at the right time. Maybe it's an opportunity that vanishes. Maybe it's a relationship that implodes. Maybe it's confidence that evaporates. Maybe it's clarity that becomes confusion. But whatever it is, it stops the threat. It neutralizes the danger. It removes the obstacle. And you never know it happened. You just know you're safe. You just know you survived. You just know somehow, some way you made it through another storm. And you think you did it alone, but you didn't. You had a guardian. You had a protector. You had someone who loves you so much that your enemies become their mission. And here's the thing that makes this even more powerful. This person doesn't do this for gratitude. They don't do this for recognition. They don't do this so you'll owe them or respect them or even know they exist. They do this because your well-being is their purpose. They do this because seeing you thrive is their reward. They do this because protecting you is as natural to them as breathing is to you. And so they move in silence. They operate in shadow. They work in the background. And you get all the credit. You get all the glory. You get all the victory. And they're perfectly fine with that. Because they're not doing this for themselves. They're doing this for you. And that is the purest form of love that exists. Love that doesn't need to be seen, doesn't need to be acknowledged, doesn't need anything except for you to be okay, for you to be safe, for you to be free to become everything you're meant to be. And anyone who tries to stop that process, anyone who tries to interfere with your evolution, becomes a problem that gets solved quietly, efficiently, permanently. You know what's crazy? Every person who's ever tried to destroy you is sitting somewhere right now, confused about why their life fell apart, why things stopped working, why they can't seem to catch a break. And they have theories, they have excuses, they have stories they tell themselves, but deep down they know something's off. They know something happened. They know they crossed a line and paid a price they didn't expect. And some of them even whisper your name when they're alone, wondering if somehow you cursed them, if somehow you're more powerful than they realized. And the truth is, you didn't curse them. You didn't even think about them long enough to curse them, because you were too busy surviving, too busy healing, too busy building. But someone else was thinking about them. Someone else was watching them. Someone else was watching them. Someone else was making sure they understood that actions have consequences. And the consequence of hurting you is a slow, systematic dismantling of everything they thought was solid, everything they thought was secure, everything they thought made them powerful. This is what people don't understand about real protection. It's not loud. It's not visible. It's not obvious. It's the enemy who suddenly can't focus, who suddenly makes mistakes, who suddenly loses support, who suddenly finds themselves isolated, exposed, vulnerable. And they don't know why. They just know everything changed after they came for you. And they can't prove anything, they can't point to anything concrete, but they feel it. They feel the weight, they feel the pressure, they feel like they're being watched, being judged, being measured, and found wanting. And that feeling, that pressure, that weight, that's the love that surrounds you, that's the protection that covers you. That's the force that ensures anyone who tries to harm you ends up harming themselves. And it happens every single time, without fail, without exception, without mercy. Because the person who loves you doesn't believe in second chances when it comes to your safety, doesn't believe in forgiveness when it comes to your enemies, doesn't believe in mercy when it comes to people who try to stop your destiny. So now you're probably wondering, who is this person? Who is this guardian? Who is this silent warrior fighting battles on my behalf? And here's where it gets interesting, because the answer might surprise you, might challenge you, might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about who's really in your corner. See, it might not be who you think. It might not be who you expect. It might not be someone you talk to every day, or someone you see regularly, or someone who posts about you on social media, because real love doesn't perform. Real protection doesn't advertise. Real loyalty doesn't need an audience. It just acts. And it acts consistently. And it acts without needing anything in return. And when you start paying attention, when you start looking for the patterns, when you start looking for the timing, you'll see it. You'll feel it. You'll know there's been someone there all along. Someone who's had your back when everyone else turned theirs. Someone who's believed in you when everyone else doubted. Someone who's fought for you when everyone else walked away. And here's what makes this even more powerful. Once you recognize it, once you see it, once you understand that you're not alone, that you've never been alone, that there's been this force, this presence, this love operating on your behalf, something shifts inside you. Something changes. You start moving different. You start speaking different. You start sconcing different. You start carrying yourself different. Because you realize you're not just protected, you're chosen. You're not just covered, you're anointed. You're not just lucky, you're appointed. And that changes everything. That changes how you walk into rooms, how you handle conflicts, how you respond to threats, because you know you're not fighting alone. You know you've got backup. You've got support. You got someone who will go to war for you without hesitation, without question, without limit. And that kind of assurance, that kind of confidence, that kind of peace, it makes you dangerous. It makes you unstoppable. It makes you the kind of person who walks through fire and doesn't even smell like smoke. Now I need you to understand something crucial. This love, this protection, this guardianship, it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you dependent. It doesn't mean you're not capable of handling your own battles. Welcome back, you beautiful, unbreakable force of nature. Sit down for this one, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shift everything you thought you knew about the past 5 years of your life. Someone just broke the silence. Someone just cracked under the weight of their own guilt. Someone from that circle, that group, that family of smiling faces who swore they had your back just confessed everything they did behind it. And I mean everything. The meetings they had about you when you weren't there, the group chats where your name was the headline, the plans they made, the lies they coordinated, the stories they rehearsed together before facing you with those warm, trustworthy eyes. It's all out now, spilled like poison from a cup they can't put back together. And honestly, you deserve to know every single twisted detail of it. They thought you'd never find out, didn't they? They thought their secret pacts were ironclad, that their whispered conversations would stay buried in the archives of their cowardice. They believed they were so clever, so coordinated, so untouchable in their little conspiracy against your peace. But here's what they forgot. Here's what they always forget when they build their houses on lies and manipulation. Eventually, someone's conscience starts rotting from the inside out. Eventually, the guilt becomes so heavy that keeping the secret hurts more than releasing it. Eventually, one of them breaks, and when they do, the whole structure comes crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. And that's exactly what just happened. One of them couldn't take it anymore, couldn't sleep another night with the weight of what they participated in, and they came forward with a confession so detailed, so disgustingly thorough that it's about to rewrite your entire understanding of the past. Let's start with the meetings, because that's where this whole thing began, in rooms you were never invited to, at tables where your name was served like the main course. They didn't just talk about you casually, no. They strategized about you. They analyzed your every move, your every post, your every word, like military generals planning an operation. They studied your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your triggers, and they documented everything with the precision of people who had made you their full-time project. These weren't random conversations or innocent concerns. These were calculated sessions designed to control the narrative around your life. They decided together what story the world would hear about you, what version of events would become the truth, what pieces of your character they would erase, and what flaws they would magnify until they became your entire identity in everyone else's eyes. The confessor, the one who finally broke. They described these meetings with the kind of detail that makes your stomach turn. They talked about how someone would always start by saying something that sounded concerned, something like, "I'm just worried about them," or "I think they're going through something." But it was never about worry. It was about building a case, about creating a narrative that positioned you as unstable, unreliable, too much, too emotional, too intense, too anything that would make people question your truth before you even spoke it. They rehearsed their responses to things you hadn't even said yet. They prepared counter-narratives for situations that hadn't happened. They built an entire false reality around you and then invited others into it, one person at a time, until you were surrounded by people who believed a version of you that never existed. And the worst part, the part that's going to hit you like a brick, is that while they were doing all this, they were still showing up in your life with smiles. They were still texting you, still laughing at your jokes, still acting like nothing had changed. They perfected the art of the double life, one face for you and one face for the meetings. They became experts at looking you in the eye while holding a knife behind their back. The confessors said they used to practice it. used to remind each other to keep it normal when you were around, to make sure their faces didn't betray the fact that they had just spent hours tearing you apart in private. They turned deception into a skill, and they got so good at it that you never suspected a thing, never felt the betrayal happening in real time because they made sure the blade was always just out of your sight. But the meetings were just the beginning, because what they did next is where it gets truly disgusting. They didn't just talk about you in private, they coordinated a campaign against your reputation. The confessor revealed that they created what they called talking points, specific phrases and stories they would all use when speaking to mutual friends, family members, anyone in your orbit. They made sure everyone heard the same version of events, the same carefully crafted narrative that painted you as the problem while they positioned themselves as the concerned, caring, patient ones who had tried so hard to help you. It was psychological warfare disguised as friendship, and they executed it with the precision of people who had done this before. They had assignments, actual roles they played in this operation. One person was designated as the voice of reason, the one who would express sympathy for you while subtly planting doubt about your mental state. Another was the evidence collector, the one who would screenshot your posts, save your messages, document your every move so they could present it later as proof of whatever narrative they were building. Someone else played the mediator, the person who would reach out to you occasionally with fake concern, asking if you were okay, not because they cared, but because they needed fresh material for the next meeting. And there was always the amplifier, the one whose job was to make sure the story spread beyond your immediate circle, to whisper the narrative into the ears of people who barely knew you, but would now form their entire opinion of you based on coordinated lies. The confessor broke down crying when they described their own role in all this, how they had volunteered to be the one who stayed closest to you, who maintained the friendship while reporting back everything you said. Every vulnerable moment you shared, every private struggle you confided. They called it gathering intel, but what it really was betrayal dressed up in strategic language. They admitted that there were times you would tell them something personal, something painful, and they would nod and hug you and tell you it was going to be okay, and then they would immediately text the group with an update, turning your pain into ammunition, your vulnerability into evidence, your trust into their weapon. And the worst part, they said, was how easy it became, how quickly they stopped feeling guilty about it because the group had normalized it, had made it seem like they were doing something necessary, something protective, something justified. The confession included screenshots, actual proof of these group chats, where your name appeared hundreds of times, messages where they laughed about things you had no idea were even being discussed, conversations where they celebrated small victories in their campaign, like when someone you both knew started to distance themselves from you, or when you posted something vulnerable and they knew they could use it against you later. They treated your life like a game, your reputation like a ball they could toss around between them, your feelings like something irrelevant to their strategy. And reading through these messages, seeing the timestamps, realizing these conversations were happening on days when they were still texting you, thinking of you and here if you need anything, it's enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Now let's talk about the specific tactics they used, because this is where the confession gets truly disturbing. They didn't just spread lies. They engineered situations designed to make you look unstable. The confessor described something they called provocation protocols, deliberate actions meant to trigger emotional responses from you that they could then use as evidence of your instability. They would say things designed to upset you, then act shocked when you reacted. They would withhold information, change plans last minute, exclude you from events, all while watching to see how you'd respond, hoping you'd break down so they could point to your reaction as proof of everything they'd been saying about you. One particularly evil tactic they used was what the confessor called the setup, where they would create situations that had no good outcome for you. They would invite you to gatherings where everyone had already been briefed on the narrative against you, where people were primed to interpret everything you did through a negative lens. You could be quiet and they'd call you withdrawn and antisocial. You could be engaged and they'd call you attention-seeking and desperate. You could tell a joke and they'd call you inappropriate. You could be serious and they'd call you too intense. There was no version of you that would be acceptable because acceptance was never the goal. Validation of their predetermined narrative was. And after these events, they would have follow-up meetings where they would dissect your behavior, finding evidence to support their case in every single thing you did or didn't do. They also admitted to something called isolation engineering, where they systematically worked to separate you from anyone who might support you or see through their manipulation. They would plant seeds of doubt about you with mutual friends, subtle comments that sounded like concern but were designed to make people question your judgment, your stability, your version of events. They would volunteer to check in with people after they spent time with you, supposedly to see how you were doing, but really to reinforce their narrative and make sure no competing truth could take root. They created an echo chamber around you where every voice except yours was saying the same thing, and they did it so gradually, so carefully, that you didn't even notice your support system dissolving until it was already gone. The confessor revealed that they had actually studied manipulation tactics, that some members of the group had researched psychological techniques specifically to use against you. They learned about gaslighting, triangulation, projection, and they implemented these strategies deliberately. They would deny things they had clearly said, making you question your memory. They would play people against each other while positioning themselves as neutral parties. They would accuse you of the exact behaviors they were engaged in, projecting their toxicity onto you so thoroughly that you started to believe maybe you were the problem. And the most disturbing part is that they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't acting out of ignorance or misunderstanding. They were consciously, deliberately, methodically working to destabilize your sense of reality. So why did they do it? What could possibly motivate a group of people to invest this much energy, this much time, this much calculated cruelty into destroying someone's reputation and mental peace? The confessor's answer to this question is perhaps the most revealing part of the entire confession. They said it started with envy, pure, unfiltered jealousy that none of them wanted to admit they felt. You had something they didn't, whether it was confidence, authenticity, success, genuine happiness, the ability to be yourself without apology. Whatever it was, it made them feel small by comparison. Jesse, they feared you. And instead of dealing with their own insecurities, instead of working on themselves or simply stepping back from the friendship, they decided to tear you down to their level. But it wasn't just envy, the confessor explained. It became something darker. It became a bonding activity, a shared mission that gave their relationships purpose and intensity. They formed a tribe united by a common enemy, and that enemy was you. Their friendships with each other deepened through their mutual participation in your destruction. They had inside jokes about you, shared secrets about the campaign, moments of celebration when a tactic worked. You became the glue that held them together, the project that gave them something to focus on besides their own empty lives. And the more invested they became in the narrative they'd created, the more they had to defend it. Because admitting they were wrong would mean facing the monstrous thing they had collectively become. The confessor also revealed something that might be the hardest thing to hear. Some of them genuinely convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. They had told the lie so many times, reinforced it so consistently among themselves, that they started to believe it. They created an alternate reality where you were actually the villain, where their actions were justified, where they were somehow the victims or the heroes protecting others from you. They built an entire mythology around their betrayal that absolved them of guilt and allowed them to sleep at night. The human mind's capacity for self-deception is terrifying, and they exploited it fully, rewriting history in real time until they couldn't even remember that the story had started as a fabrication. And here's the truly sick part. The confessor admitted that there were moments when some of them had doubts, times when someone would say, maybe we're going too far, or I'm starting to feel bad about this. But those doubts were always shut down by the group. They had created a culture where questioning the narrative was seen as betrayal, where showing compassion for you was treated as weakness or naivety. They reinforced each other's worst impulses, talked each other out of guilt, reminded each other of the story they'd agreed upon whenever someone's conscience started to surface. They became a cult with a single doctrine. You were the problem, and anything they did in response to that problem was justified. It's a level of collective delusion that would be almost impressive if it wasn't so absolutely disgusting. Now here's what happens next. Because this confession doesn't just expose them, it liberates you. Every moment of confusion you felt, every time you questioned yourself, every instance where you thought maybe you were being too sensitive or reading too much into things, all of it now makes perfect sense. You weren't paranoid. You were picking up on something real. Your instincts were screaming at you that something was wrong, and you were right. The gaslighting didn't work completely, because some part of you, some inner knowing they couldn't reach, held on to the truth, and now that truth has been validated in the most concrete way possible, through the confession of someone who was there, who participated, who kept records. But here's what they didn't account for. Here's the flaw in their entire operation. While they were busy trying to destroy you, you were busy becoming someone they could never touch. While they were having meetings about you, you were building yourself in silence. While they were crafting narratives, you were living your truth. While they were investing all their energy into tearing you down, you were investing your energy into rising above anything they could possibly do to you. They made you their full-time project. And in doing so, they revealed that their entire existence had become about you, while your existence had nothing to do with them. You already won, and this confession is just the universe's way of making sure you know it. The confessor said something that should bring you immense satisfaction. They're terrified now. Now that the truth is out, now that the confession exists, they're panicking. They're scrambling to control the damage, reaching out to people trying to get ahead of the story, suddenly concerned about how they'll be perceived. The same people who spent years carefully crafting a false narrative about you are now desperate to craft a narrative about themselves, one where they're not the villains this confession makes them out to be. They're experiencing a fraction of what they put you through. The paranoia, the fear of judgment, the anxiety about reputation. And unlike you, they actually deserve it because their reputation is based on lies, and yours never was. And here's your power in all this. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to expose them publicly. You don't have to confront anyone or demand apologies. The truth is already working on your behalf, spreading through the same networks they once used against you, changing minds, shifting perceptions, revealing them for what they are. Your vindication doesn't require your effort because it's built on facts, on evidence, on confession. Their destruction is inevitable because it's built on lies that have now been exposed. You can simply continue living your life, being your authentic self, thriving in your truth, while they crumble under the weight of theirs. That's the beautiful irony of this whole situation. They spent years trying to destroy you and ended up destroying themselves. But let's go even deeper, because there's a truth here that transcends this specific situation. A truth about people and power and what happens when someone refuses to be broken. The reason they targeted you, the reason they invested so much energy into trying to tear you down, is because you represented something they couldn't control. You were authentic in a world of performance. You were genuine in a world of facades. You had the courage to be yourself while they were busy being whoever they thought would get them approval. Your very existence was a mirror reflecting their own inauthenticity, and instead of using that mirror to grow, they tried to shatter it. This is what always happens to people who refuse to play the game, who won't compromise their truth for comfort, who insist on being real in spaces that reward pretense. The system, the group, the collective mediocrity, it always tries to eliminate the ones who remind everyone else what integrity looks like. They can't let you thrive because your thriving exposes their compromise. They can't let you succeed on your own terms because your success questions their sacrifice. They can't let you be happy being yourself because your happiness reveals that all their contortions and calculations and careful image management were unnecessary. You're living proof that there's another way, and that scares them more than anything else ever could. The confession reveals this truth in stark detail. Multiple people in these group chats expressed frustration that you didn't seem affected by their tactics, that you kept going like nothing was wrong, that you still seemed happy despite everything they were doing. They were furious that their campaign wasn't working the way they wanted, that you weren't collapsing under the weight of their manipulation.